So thank you, Caleb and Chris. So we've got 4 different audiences. Thank you, Louisa. A couple different audiences, employees from industry, researchers. You might be sharing your professional identity with your institution, your colleagues at your institution, journalists, definitely. So employers, mentors, students, yes. These are all great. These are all wonderful. Great points. Well, it is 1 after. I would like to welcome all of you joining us today, panel members, absolutely, for our session on surviving a research career crisis, tailoring your professional communications. We were engaging in a warm-up chat, and many of you were entering your thoughts in the warm-up chat, and you are welcome to continue to do so. Who all you communicate with, which professional audiences, and how many. To let you know a little bit about what we're going to do today. So we're going to do a really quick poll, and then we're going to introduce our speaker. I'm going to share our expectations, and then we're going to hear, our speaker, Dr. Cassie Briggs, is going to do an entire workshop with us online. Thank you all for sharing some of the different audiences you communicate with. For our opening poll, we're going to do one really quickly here. Just wanted to let you share a little bit about who you are, what describes you. So please go ahead, and you can check more than one answer. Who would you say you are? Are you a grad student, undergrad, postdoctoral researcher, professor, scientist or researcher, science enthusiast, educator? None of these. And I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds to finish answering. 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to go ahead and share what you answered so that everyone can see. We've got a lot of scientists, or about half scientists or researchers, and then another quarter, and some of that half might be our postdoctoral researchers, are researchers or scientists, and so are the grad students, really. So undergrad students, you may or may not be. When I was an undergrad, I definitely wasn't doing research, but some of you might be. We've got a number of scientist enthusiasts and some educators as well, and at least one who's none of these. Thank you so much for sharing. So this is what we're going to be doing. I wanted to share some expectations for this workshop as well. This will be fairly interactive. Please do be prepared to answer questions. You can, and then the recording slides and resources are going to be shared with those who registered, but not publicly. So you will have access to all of that, but not, we're not sharing all of that publicly. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Cassie Briggs is a success in science career coach, and I am going to let her continue with the rest of her introduction. I'm going to stop sharing here. And
wonderful. Thank you all for coming. It seems like we have a lot of students in the crowd, maybe thinking about what's to come after graduation. We have some graduate students who are getting ready to hit the job market, and maybe some postdocs and early career professionals who are ready to make a bit of a transition or to get promoted in their role. No matter where you are, I'm really excited that you're here today and to dive in. So I can't slide past this. We have to address the elephant in the room here, in that many of you are here today trying to navigate this unprecedented and challenging job market. Things were hard before, with high rates of ghosting and the fact that only 30% of jobs are even posted on job boards. But now we have a shifting national landscape, different priorities, revoked offers, and hiring freezes. So the question becomes, how do you not only survive a research career crisis, but also thrive as a scientist? And so today, not only will I reveal your most powerful, yet often overlooked tool, but I'll show you how to sharpen and apply it so that you can protect, elevate, and more intentionally steer that incredible career you've worked so hard to build. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Cassie Briggs, career coach at Success in Science. No, your internet did not freeze just then. That was very intentional on my part. So I want to ask you, based on that brief introduction alone, I'm Dr. Cassie Briggs, career coach at Success in Science. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much trust, credibility, and connection do you feel with me right now? So go ahead and respond in the chat. Be honest on a scale of 1 to 10. How much trust, credibility, and connection do you feel? Awesome. Good. I mean, it's not awesome that you don't feel that connection yet, but exactly what I expect to see. And some of you already know me, so that, that we'll ignore those high numbers for that reason. Great. Okay. Awesome. Generally speaking, low numbers. That's what I thought. That's what I expected. So let me try again. I'm Dr. Cassie Briggs, former university professor turned career coach and founder of Success in Science. I've helped over 100 scientists, from students to established professionals, explore careers and land fulfilling jobs in science and medicine. I hold a PhD in conservation genomics, and I spent 12 years conducting research and teaching at Tier 1 universities, all without a single sip of coffee. Shockingly, I think I found the only other person on this planet who also doesn't drink coffee, my soulmate and partner, a federal, now state biologist. We now live in Michigan with our 2 young boys and 2 dogs, which, fun fact, I trained one of those dogs to help me track turtles for my research. And my work has taken me all over the world, from Australia to New Zealand to recently Mexico. And while I haven't been to Indonesia yet, I have fed a Komodo dragon. So, how much trust, credibility, and connection do you feel with me now on that same scale of 1 to 10? Oh, look at that. Look at those high numbers. I love it. I love it. Okay. -1 for the coffee. Yeah, not everybody's with me on that. That's okay. Oh, wonderful. So, same person, just a fuller picture. That's the power of a professional brand, also referred to as a professional identity. So, your professional identity is your most powerful tool in riding out and even thriving in an uncertain research environment. Your professional identity is the story about who you are as a scientist and professional. It's your unique combination of values, interests, skills, and priorities. So your values are what drive you. In my intro, you probably picked up on one of my values, which is learning. Your interests are what excite you. So for example, for me, I love nature. Remember feeding the Komodo dragon? Yes. So that's one of my interests that I communicated. And your skills are what lead you to your success. So you may be able to infer some of my skills based on my background in conservation genomics, maybe something like PCR. And lastly, your priorities, what you need in order to thrive in life. My career is a big priority in my life and something I wanted to continue to grow even after becoming a mother. I've created an entire online course and group coaching program that dives into discovering what your professional identity is, things like your values, your interests, your skills, and your priorities. So I'm not going to get into that today. But if it's something you could use some support on, I encourage you to check out successinscienceacademy.com. I mean, if there's enough interest among all of you, I'm happy to put together a group specifically for LPI folks. All right, but today we're going to fast forward to the topic of communicating your professional identity. Because a poorly communicated identity could be the difference between a recruiter discovering you or missing out on you completely. It could be the difference between a promotion or being passed over. It could be the difference between landing your next research grant or having to scrap the project altogether. It could be the difference between being in a job you love and one you dread. Your career fulfillment is really riding on this. So let's work on this professional identity, put it out there, and reap the rewards. All right, but before we get into the frameworks and strategies, I want you to step into the shoes of a hiring manager. Let's imagine your company is hiring for a space data scientist to apply planetary climate modeling expertise to develop, I don't know, predictive models for extreme environments from Mars to Earth. But let's say it's 10 o'clock in the morning and the recruiter you hired just dropped a folder on your desk with resumes, LinkedIn profile summaries, and transcripts from the first round of screening interviews. There are 10 candidates in this pile, and your task is to decide by the end of the day today who, if anyone, is moving on to a second interview. Here's the catch. Your calendar is slammed with meetings, and you promised to leave early for your daughter's soccer game today. You don't have the luxury of spending hours to ponder every detail. You need quick clarity, who's worth a closer look, and who's not a fit. So let me ask you, what would be your approach given this time crunch? Go ahead and share in the chat, and I'll take a minute to read a couple responses. How would you narrow down the list and choose that one candidate? Oh, great. I didn't even give you references, so that wasn't even in this pile just yet. But yes, credentials, good. Experience. Start with the resume, okay? Skills, we're looking for the closest match. Excellent. Another resume first. Okay, fantastic. So my hope was that you would skim briefly at each of these pieces. So here's what you might get. So imagine that you flip open that first candidate's file. And on the resume, you notice that they self-identify as a space data scientist, exactly what you need. But their LinkedIn headline says astrobiologist and atmospheric physicist and radiative transfer, remote sensing. And in the interview transcript, when they were asked, tell me about yourself, their answer was, I study Martian atmospheric processes, mostly radiative transfer models, and I occasionally collaborate with university colleagues on comparative climate work. Oh, and I also mentor students and support outreach. Now you flip open the file for another scientist. Their LinkedIn headline says planetary data scientist bridging Mars missions and Earth climate analytics. And in the interview transcript, when asked, tell me about yourself, they said, I use models of planetary atmospheres like radiation and temperature data from NASA's 2020 Mars mission to develop tools that help industries work in extreme environments, make better climate risk decisions. Okay, so real quickly, I'm curious, given candidate 1 and 2's basic outline here, who would you pick if either one? 1 or 2? Oh yeah. Wow, is this going to be unanimous? Love this. Okay, great. So the difference isn't necessarily the skills, it's the clarity and consistency of their professional identity story, right? So the first candidate's inconsistency yields confusion and maybe even some doubt, while the second sounds like someone who is crystal clear on who they are and what they're looking for, and clearly aligns with the opportunity. So for example, this role is for someone focused on applying data. So think model integration, tool development, those kinds of things. But the way the first candidate describes themselves suggests their focus is on advancing knowledge or hypothesis-driven investigation. Very common for academics, but if you're applying for an industry job, you might want to shift the focus a little bit. So assuming that the candidates have the exact same skills, only candidate 2 describes them in a way that sounds transferable and relevant to the job at hand. All right. So that's the power of communicating your identity well. It doesn't just make you look polished, it makes you trustworthy. So be consistent. All right. So now that you've seen how confusing it can be when someone's identity doesn't line up across different contexts and how powerful it is when it does, let's talk about where we're headed today. So here's our roadmap for the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to look at three major arenas where your professional identity needs to show up consistently. Written communication, think those permanent documents that often make the first impression, like your resumes, cover letters, bios, emails. Digital communication, which are the dynamic places where your story is constantly evolving, like your LinkedIn or your professional website. And verbal communication, the live moments where your tone and presence matter, things like interviews, conference introductions, or even just networking conversations. And before we dive into each of these, I want to highlight one principle. If you hear nothing else today, hear this: know your audience. I took my 3-year-old to the zoo a couple months ago, and several of their butterflies were starting to emerge from their chrysalises. Now, as a conservation biologist who actually spent several years of her career on monarch butterfly research, I could have gone really into the weeds and got really technical, but I didn't. I knew and respected my audience, my little 3-year-old, and didn't want to stifle his interest by being overly technical. So I simply said, "Do you remember the Very Hungry Caterpillar book at home? That's what's happening. That butterfly was once a very hungry caterpillar. Then it made this cocoon when it changed into this beautiful butterfly, and now it's ready to come out." And that was enough for him to be fascinated and without being overwhelmed. But if I was on my field trip with my introductory biology students at Michigan State, I would have said, "What you're seeing is the final stage of metamorphosis. There was a complete transformation where most larval tissues were broken down into this cellular soup, which were repurposed as the raw materials and energy needed to form that adult body. And the adult body is constructed from specialized clusters of undifferentiated cells, which were dormant through the entire larval stages. And now they're differentiating into predetermined structures like antennae, wings, legs, those kind of things. And the combination of hormonal changes in the butterfly and environmental cues like temperature are triggering the butterfly to emerge." Communicating your identity isn't saying the exact same words everywhere. It's about telling the same story with different levels of detail, emphasizing or framing depending on who's listening. So the butterfly is still a butterfly, but you adjust how you tell it so it resonates with your audience. So if you're talking to a recruiter, you might keep it broad and simple. If you're talking to a hiring manager, you might go a level deeper. And if you're talking to a technical peer, you might even bring in that jargon and methodology. So as we move into the written, digital, and verbal communication today, I want you to keep that butterfly moment in mind. Clarity and resonance come from knowing, respecting, and catering to your audience. All right, so let's get started. How do you communicate your identity in written documents? These are those permanent documents like your resumes, cover letters, bios, even emails. They're the things that once you hit send, they're out of your hands. There's no undo button. And because they're permanent, these documents often make the first impression and the most lasting one. These are the documents people will go back to jog their memory, to evaluate you, and it serves as a baseline for any future interactions with you. So if these written communications are vague or inconsistent, people fill in the blanks and not always in your favor. If they're clear and tailored, they make it easy for someone to see the value you bring. To accomplish this, you need to know your audience and what's important to them. So now instead of talking in the abstract, let's look at how this plays out in practice. As I walk through some examples, we're going to explore how you might communicate the same exact experience with hiring committees from 4 different sectors: academia, government, industry, and nonprofit. One caveat before we dive in: there's a lot of variation from organization to organization. So 2 companies in the exact same sector might look for very different things. So think of these not as universal rules, but more of general rules of thumb. So patterns that can kind of help you frame your own experiences. So let me ask you, what do you think each sector values most? So let's start with academia. What does academia value? Just one word or phrase of things they might care about. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Oh, yeah, publications times 1,000. Accuracy, research, curiosity. Yes, good. Self-responsibility. Wonderful. Methodology. Yes, good. A lot of these are excellent. Please add them to my list. So I wrote here, academia values knowledge creation, rigor, credibility, and peer recognition. And you can demonstrate that with degrees, publications, grants, teaching, mentorship. So we want to emphasize depth, novelty, methodological rigor, and the contribution of knowledge when we're applying to jobs in that sector. So good. A lot of you are coming from that sector, so this is a good start. Let's see how we do with some of the other ones. All right, what about government? Government value. Experience, broader impact, acronyms. Oh, you all are funny. You haven't been to Michigan State until you've seen acronyms. All right, hands-on experience, degrees, leadership, new ideas. Good, good. All right, let's see if I can add to your list. Relationship building, that's a good one too. All right, so generally speaking, government values service to the public, accountability, compliance, and stability, which is demonstrated by policy impact, usefulness of data, adherence to regulations, longevity of initiatives. So we want to emphasize things like reliability, precision, mission alignment, adherence to protocols, and working within a structure. So this is generally true when you think about some federal government agencies as well as some state level agencies. Wonderful. All right, it's going to keep getting harder. All right, industry. What do we think industry values? Yeah, technical skills is a big one. Efficiency, yes. Have you guys seen my previous presentations before? This is great. Work ethic, good. Experience again, yes. Oh, yeah. I love the specificity there, Garrett. Numerical improvements in productivity. Absolutely. Good. All right, I'm getting fewer responses, which I take it to mean we're less confident in what these different sectors mean. So, industry. Think for profit, and a lot of you all are. So they value efficiency, innovation, scalability, and return on investment. So you can demonstrate this through results, speed, profitability, problem solving. So we want to emphasize measurable outcomes, technical expertise that's applied to real world challenges, and an ability to innovate quickly and adapt to changing markets. So those are the things when you're thinking about transferring some of your academic skills, we would transform your resume bullets to emphasize these elements of what you've done. All right, last but not least, the often forgotten, unknown sector, nonprofit, but there's lots of great opportunities in nonprofit. So what do we think nonprofit values? Outreach, absolutely. Relationship building, that's huge. That's probably biggest in this sector. Passion, yes. Motivation, accessibility, absolutely. Securing funding, yes. Yep, that's very true too. Not always from grants, lots from grants, but also partnerships and stakeholders too. Good. Okay. So nonprofit values mission impact, advocacy, community benefit, and donor trust, which is demonstrated through mission aligned programs, clear social environmental benefits, and effective use of limited resources. That last one's kind of big too. So we want to emphasize alignment with mission, collaboration, even persuasion. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but your ability to get people on board with your ideas, your resourcefulness, and stories of impact and service. Don't underestimate those anecdotal stories from your work there. Wonderful. Okay, all fine and dandy. So with that framing in mind, I want us to now apply this for a real example. So let's say you develop models to analyze planetary atmospheric radiation data. And obviously this is inspired by some of my research into those of you working at LPI. So you're going to write a resume bullet for this. If you're writing it for the academic audience, you might write something like, developed novel radiative transfer models, advancing understanding of Martian atmospheric processes, resulting in new insights into planetary climate dynamics, and 3 peer-reviewed publications. A lot of words, but I want you to notice what I'm emphasizing here. Novelty, it's literally the second word, and peer credibility. I'm talking about those publications. So this experience phrased this way would appeal to an academic audience in general. All right, but let's look at if you wanted to appeal to government. So you'd modify this bullet to read something like, designed and validated atmospheric radiation models, integrating data from the Mars 2020 Perseverance mission, enhancing NASA's planetary climate data sets that inform federal policy decisions on space exploration. So notice what I'm emphasizing here. The reliability of the data and the policy impact. And I'm leaning into something that was hosted by the government in one of their missions, right? So this is a way you're talking about the exact same thing, but a different perspective to appeal to a different audience. All right, what if you wanted to appeal to industry? In this case, we might say something like engineered and optimized radiative transfer models that transformed planetary mission data into predictive tools for simulating thermal and radiation environments, accelerating the development of spacecraft and sensor technologies. Right? What am I emphasizing here? Efficiency, innovation, and results. That last phrase right there is a result. So in industry, those are the elements that we're wanting to emphasize. And then lastly, if you wanted to appeal to a nonprofit audience, we would emphasize something very different. So maybe you say, developed open source models, translating Mars mission atmospheric data into educational and policy relevant tools, supporting organizations advancing planetary science literacy and climate resilience research. So here we're emphasizing service to the public and mission alignment with how nonprofits think about serving the community. So notice that in all 4 of these bullets, the core activity is the same. You develop models to analyze planetary atmospheric radiation data. But what changes is the framing. So you're not reinventing a new story every time, you're just pulling different threads of the same story to highlight what matters most to the audience. All right, give me a thumbs up, a yes, something if you're following me in the chat, or an emoji's fine too. Great. Okay. So, and I will remind everyone too, the slides will be available, as will the recording. So if you need to listen back, I encourage you to do. It's a lot of content we're cramming into 45 minutes. But the key takeaway here is that communicating your identity in writing isn't about rewriting your career. It's about aligning the way you talk about your work with what the audience values. That's the takeaway. So one word of caution before we move on. So I gave you a bunch of resume bullet examples for each of the sectors. They're not resume ready, just to be clear. There are a few things that need to be tweaked before you would submit this in an application. But if you need help with crafting your resume bullets, I did create this free guide that walks you through the steps of crafting a compelling resume bullet with examples. So you can download this at successinsciencecc.com/resume. And again, these links will be available to you now and at the end of the session today. Okay. So that's a taste of how you communicate your professional identity in your permanent written documents. But here's the thing, in today's world, those documents almost never stand alone. The thing about it is, the very next thing people do is they look you up, right? They're going to look at your LinkedIn profile or do a Google search. So that means your digital presence becomes the next layer of communication, and in some cases, the first layer. So unlike your written documents, though, which are fixed once you send them, your digital platforms are very dynamic. They're always evolving, always discoverable, and they often reach people you never knew were even looking. So let's talk about how to communicate your identity in those digital spaces. So LinkedIn, personal websites, or anywhere else your professional story shows up online. So here your audience is often much broader. After all, you don't always know who's looking at your LinkedIn profile, your Google Scholar page, or even your personal website, or why they're looking. So it could be a recruiter, could be a colleague, could be a potential collaborator, could be a journalist. I know that was one of the audiences one of the attendees was talking to at the beginning of this talk. So because of that, your digital presence can and should be a little broader than your resume. It's the place to capture the full scope of what you do and what you care about. But here's the caveat. Broader does not mean vague. Too many people try to make their LinkedIn or website appeal to anyone and everyone. The problem with that approach is that it waters down your message until no one knows what you really stand for anymore. So instead, you want to be clear about your lane, your niche. So while still showing a range of interests and skills, as the saying goes, have you heard the saying? The riches are in the niches. It's so true. So don't be afraid to be specific enough for your niche. And here's what I mean by that. When people land on your profile, you want them to understand these three things immediately: what you do, why it matters, and how you can bring value to their world. So, one of the most important parts of your digital presence is your LinkedIn headline. It's the very first thing people see when your profile shows up in a search result. And it's not just a tagline, this is actual searchable text. Google picks it up too. So your headline works best when it strikes a balance between that clarity, that broadness, but also specificity. If it's too vague, like research scientist, people are going to scroll right past you because it doesn't tell them anything unique. If it's too overloaded with jargon, it might only make sense to a handful of people. So there's a clear balance here. So I want you to think of your headline as a billboard version of your professional identity. So in 120 characters or less, you want to capture what you do, your role expertise, how you add value, your skills and focus, and the impact it has, or your so what. Okay? What you do, how you add value, and the impact it has. So if your LinkedIn headline was research scientist and they read nothing else in your profile, recruiters for what type of opportunities do you think would be reaching out to you, if any? Many of you are research scientists. I'm a research scientist, but could I send a robot to the moon? Absolutely not. I'm a conservation biologist. So that title is far too broad to attract the right recruiters. But what if your headline was something like Senior Planetary Geologist, mapping lunar and Martian terrains, informing future space exploration? Now you're not going to get the recruiters looking for a biologist. You're going to get the recruiters that are the right fit for you. So which opportunities do you think you'd be most interested in? I mean, biology is pretty cool. I'm obviously biased, but I think what you do is really incredible too. And so give the specificity so the right people find you and pursue that connection with you. So that's why your LinkedIn headline and your broader digital presence matter so much. It's really that front door of your professional story online. So, like I said, it's the billboard on the highway. People are zipping by, scrolling fast, and you only have a few words to catch their attention and make them want to know you more. So, avoid vague phrases like data scientist that can apply to 1,000 different fields. You'll just blend in with the noise. So if on the other side, though, if you're overly technical, you'll confuse people that are outside of your niche. So if you're trying to attract an audience of journalists, for example, you have to be broad enough and inclusive enough to encourage them. But when you strike that sweet spot, that clear, specific, and aligned with your identity, headline, you not only show up in the right searches, but you also invite the right people to reach out to you. So I want to put you in the hot seat for just a second. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 meaning it couldn't be better, how well do you think your current LinkedIn headline communicates your professional identity and attracts your target audience? And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I think your answer has to be 0. But okay, not uncommon, y'all. Not uncommon. Now, I will say, when it comes to LinkedIn, if you are applying to industry jobs, absolutely you should have a LinkedIn profile and put some effort into that. That's where a lot of them are hanging out. Academia is moving that way, but largely think of things like ResearchGate or your own professional website. Those matter too. It gets trickier though, because if you have your own professional website, have you ever heard of SEO? Search engine optimization. You got to learn some fundamentals of that to make sure you're popping up on searches. So LinkedIn makes it nice because people are hanging out there and can filter and search for things more explicitly. So I encourage you to have a LinkedIn profile if you don't yet. So we've talked about your written documents, the permanent records that people save and circulate. We've talked about your digital presence, the dynamic billboard that's discoverable anytime, anywhere. But here's the truth. No matter how strong these pieces are, eventually someone will want to meet you. They'll want to hear you explain what you do in real time to see how you carry yourself in a conversation, in an interview, or even at a conference coffee break. And that's where your verbal communication comes in. These live interactions are often the deciding factor in whether people believe the story your documents and digital presence have been telling. And just like before, your professional identity should still be the through line, consistent, authentic, but adapted, of course, to the moment and the audience in front of you. So verbal communication shows up in so many places. You can think about that 30-second introduction you give when you first meet somebody at a conference, or the walk me through your background or tell me about yourself in an interview. The way you describe your role to a collaborator or even to your neighbor who asks you what you do at LPI. High stakes moments like defending your proposal to a funding committee or negotiating a promotion. These are all examples of where your verbal communication of your professional identity are so critical. So I want you to imagine you're introducing yourself at a conference and someone asks you the classic question. So what do you do? Let's assume that you study planetary atmospheres using radiative transfer models and mission data to understand how radiation and climate behave in extreme environments. For a technical audience, you might say something like, I model how solar radiation interacts with planetary atmospheres, primarily on Mars, using data from the MEDA instrument aboard the Perseverance rover. My work focuses on improving radiative transfer models and comparing Martian and Earth atmospheres to better predict surface conditions for future missions. But for a non-technical audience, you might say, I study how sunlight and heat move through planetary atmospheres, especially on Mars. We use data from NASA's Perseverance rover to understand what the climate is like there and what it would take for humans or robots to safely explore and live on the surface. Notice that a little bit of jargon and methodological detail is perfectly fine for a technical audience. I mean, they're likely talking to you because they care about those details, and that's the value you can offer them. But for non-technical audiences, the focus shifts completely. They're usually talking to you because they care about the impact of your work, specifically how it connects to them, their community, or their mission. So they don't need the details of how you developed your algorithms, but they do need to know how your work helps people breathe cleaner air, respond to climate events, or make smarter decisions. So we want to cater our verbiage based on technical or non-technical audiences. But here's the other piece that a lot of us often forget. It's not just the words. Your tone and body language carry just as much weight in verbal identity communication. So if you sound hesitant or apologetic, people may assume you're not confident in your expertise, even if your words are brilliant. If you sound animated and passionate, and your enthusiasm can make the audience just lean in and care, even if they don't fully understand those technicalities. You want to think eye contact, posture, pacing, all those subtle signals reinforce your story and make it memorable. So whether you're in front of peers at a conference or explaining your work to a local community group, your presence tells as much of the story as your content does. So adapt your language, your tone, and your presence to your audience without changing who you are or what you stand for. Today, we've explored how your professional identity shows up across 3 communication channels. Written channels, so those permanent documents that shape first impressions. Digital channels, the dynamic platforms where your story evolves. Verbal channels, the live interactive moments where tone and presence matter. And now that we've talked through those written, digital, and verbal communications, each plays a role in how your professional identity is seen, heard, and remembered. But here's the truth. You don't need to overhaul everything at once. This was a lot in a short time frame to learn. So let's focus on one area first. So let me ask you this. If you could pick just one of these communication areas, written, digital, or verbal, right now, that would move the needle the most for you, what would you pick? Written, digital, or verbal? A lot of digital and verbals. All right. Okay. Notice that whatever one you picked, it points you towards your first tiny action for the week. So a lot of us will watch a webinar and that's the end of it. So I want to encourage you after this webinar, write down one thing, one tiny, tiny thing that you're going to do this week to move the needle on your written, digital, or verbal communication. So maybe that's updating a single resume bullet. Maybe that's refreshing your LinkedIn headline. Maybe that's practicing your 30-second intro in the mirror. I want you to know that these small changes, these small commitments really compound to give you big results. Plus, do some of those things. Circle back with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share some feedback and give you some support too. So I encourage you this week, take one tiny small action on one of these items. So your career path may still hold a little uncertainty, but with a clear professional identity communicated across all these channels we've talked about, you'll always have a through line, your story, that keeps you moving in the right direction, no matter what twists in the road ahead may hold. And so I really sincerely want to thank LPI for hosting me. I want to thank all of you for dedicating your precious time to be here today and to learn something that will move your career forward. And as a thank you, I want to give away a free professional evaluation of your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so for anybody who's hung on and is still here today, we are going to draw a winner to receive that. And also, while we're doing that, two things are going to happen. One, you'll see a link for feedback that will be sent to me. Will be in the chat, but it's also the same thing as that QR code in the slide. I would greatly appreciate your feedback on this webinar. I've already incorporated some feedback from the NASA folks at Goddard that has improved it. And so I'm very receptive, and thank you so much for taking the time to do that. And then LPI has a couple of questions for you as well that we'll ask here at the end. So hang on tight. I'm going to hand it back over to Christine to draw our winner and to close us out.
All right. Well, we have we've done a list of everybody who's registered and participated in this webinar, and the winner of the drawing is Jay Baker. Jay, you still with us here right now?
Jay Baker, if you're here, drop a yes in the chat. Otherwise, we'll pull our next winner.
When I looked at participants earlier, Jay was listed. See if there's he left.
Oh, too bad.
No.
So
Okay.
another one gets lucky. All right.
The second one, the second number matches up to Amanda Stockton. Amanda, are you with us? Looks like Amanda's here.
Amanda.
And we do have a few questions we'd
Amanda,
like.
there she is. Woohoo! Congrats.
Amanda is deferring it to another person. Says that she doesn't need it as much as somebody else might. Okay, let me do
Amanda,
another
that's
random
sweet.
generator here. Let's generate another number. Let's see, number 59. Who was 59 on the list? 59 on the list. Andrea Hughes. Andrea, are you with us? Andrea, it looks like you're listed here. Are you with us now? Yep. Andrea Hughes. Andrea Hughes who registered.
Oh,
Yep,
yay, she's here.
Okay.
Woohoo!
All right, Andrea, we'll be in touch by email about that. In the meanwhile, before we finalize everything, Cassie, would you mind answering just a few of the questions?
I would be happy to. And so if you have a question that you're here live for, feel free to drop it in the chat. And I know we have a couple questions that were emailed in ahead of time. So is there one you'd like me to start with?
There's been a couple who ventured some into the Q&A. One, how do we tailor our LinkedIn profile if we have multiple skills that are different from one another, but we want to market ourselves for jobs that could go with either skill set?
Oh, this is a good one. Okay, so this was my story too, especially when I was transitioning from being a research professor and then shifting into environmental education and now shifting again into career coaching. And so if you want to market yourself and be eligible for both, the best option you can do is and this would be helpful if you were in the chat dropping an example of a little bit about who you are, but I'll give you an example from the sense of, say you were doing some planetary work, but you want to switch into doing some Earth climate stuff and you have some experience in that as well. So maybe some of it is on modeling and another is more on development of the actual engineering prototypes for the things on Earth. So those are pretty different. But if you want to market yourself in both of those, what you would want to do is include keywords for both in your headline. And then your about section has to tie it all together. Okay, so you have to tie a cohesive story together. And I actually helped another client at NASA do this exact same thing. So if you could do me a favor, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn, Cassie M. Briggs. Just find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be more than happy to work with you specifically on your scenario. But the general words of advice, use keywords for both. Your about section needs to tie it all together in a singular story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then earlier, somebody was pointing out as a student, any recommendations for students on how they should list themselves on their profile pages like LinkedIn?
Yes. Do not accept the default that LinkedIn gives you. It will literally say student at in your university. So this is your opportunity to craft what you want to be and how you see yourself. So let's say you are a student at the University of Arizona and you do are majoring in something specific, it's not going to include that. So if you include your major there, that's extremely helpful. So when I was an undergrad, I mean, my particular major isn't all that helpful. Back in the day, we only had biology. We didn't have all the different options you have today. So I would have said, because I was doing research with a professor at the same time I was a student, I would have probably highlighted research assistant as my title. And I probably would have been a little bit more specific than that because research assistant exists in every field. So I would say research assistant in physiology lab. So give it some more context. Definitely don't accept the default. And then if you don't have that research experience with a particular PI, just give it some direction. So if you want to be uh, studying space or algorithms or the data side, give it those elements. So you can say, and I don't love aspiring data scientist, for example. It's okay to say that you're currently a student, but maybe the other half of your headline, I tend to separate mine with the pipe symbol, will say what you're looking for. Seeking, maybe it's grad school, seeking an industry position. So give people something to know what to connect to with you about. So if you are thinking as a student, primarily your LinkedIn profile is an opportunity to appeal to recruiters. Think about what recruiters might be writing in your keyword search, in their keyword search, include those keywords in yours. So as a student, you might include some of the skills you have, right? Do you have coding skills in Python? Put Python in your headline because they're going to include those things in their searches. So I would say your title, your field, some of the skills you have, and what you're aspiring and looking for. So that's what I would put in my headline as a student.
Thank you. We've got so many questions. We're not going to be able to answer all of them, but there were a couple that seem to be related, both submitted earlier and now, about how to I self-identify if you're applying to jobs that are not as niche as what you're doing, where you've got some or tailoring what you're doing for a job that's not your primary area of expertise, but very much fits within some aspects of your skills.
Okay. So is this kind of referring to Avishek's question? Is it related
Uh,
about even if your experience for a role doesn't match well,
yeah,
how to
yeah.
communicate it? Okay. So, this happens a lot, believe it or not, especially with people making career transitions. And so it's our job to convey how transferable our skills are to another field. So I'll give you an example. I had a client who was a senior in college and really wanted to be a wildlife biologist, but quite literally had zero experience in that. The only thing that supported it was the coursework. Um, all his background, like his working experience, was working at Olive Garden in a stockyard, stocking shelves. And so in that instance, the role he was aiming for didn't match that at all. So we dug a little deeper and we thought about, okay, what about those working experience, like Olive Garden, would appeal to someone who wants a wildlife biologist out in the field with them? And so one of the elements is Say you're missing an ingredient in the kitchen and it eliminates a bunch of dishes off the menu. As a waiter, you want to be able to suggest an alternative option to that customer to retain them. Okay. It's actually not all that different from field work. If you forget one of your pieces of equipment, you are not driving 2 hours back to campus to grab it. You are going to find a way to make it work and to troubleshoot. And so every resume bullet we had, we conveyed the things that we felt were transferable and then use the cover letter to tell the more complete story of how it is transferable. Other things that we did, I very, very rarely recommend including hobbies on a resume, but some rules are made to be broken. And so this particular student was a total outdoorsman. I mean, like backpacking trips through Europe, overnight camping, like the works, fishing, hunting, all of it. And so in his case, that was the only thing that sort of supported the grit and the grind it takes to be out in the field for long hours in harsh conditions. The guy got 10 interviews. So I'm very confident that if you find a way to communicate those things in a transferable way and is very mindful of the audience, it can go 1,000 miles and get you a lot of opportunities. So it's okay if your experience doesn't line up perfectly. You need to find the things that align with what the audience wants to hear. So what part of your story do they want to hear? If you're an academic applying to industry, they don't care generally about your publications, but they do care about your research. They do care about how you came up with those methods, how you made that protocol more efficient. So those are the things we want to highlight. The second thing I want to say about this is I have a saying, do you want to address the elephant in the room or send in the cheetah? And so what I mean by that is when you have a gap, so you're looking at a job ad and you don't check off a box, you have a choice. Do you address the elephant in the room and say, I don't have that skill, but I'm a quick learner. Here's evidence of that. Or do you throw in the cheetah, which means distract them with something else that you have to offer that's relevant to them that they didn't know they wanted, but now that they saw it in you, they want it in all the other candidates. Okay, so we can also think about if it's a skill not listed, but you think is relevant as you've gotten to know the audience, absolutely include it. And it can downplay the gap you have. And that includes gaps in your work history. So if you have 6 months to 2 years off kind of thing, it can overshadow that employment gap too.
Thank you. There were several who did ask about gaps, so that's great. Um, did you have anything else to recommend in terms of addressing gaps in your resume or and profiles in any other way?
Yeah. Um, I actually did an interesting exercise with a bunch of hiring managers, and I presented them with 3 different resumes. By the way, they were all me. They were just catered differently. And I generated one with AI, by the way. They didn't like that one, shocker. And so in one of the resumes, I elected to leave out everything I have done for the last 5 years as a career coach and just took it all off. So it looked like I haven't been working for 5 years. That did not deter them. I was shocked, even myself. So I had conveyed what I do have so much, they didn't even notice that I hadn't been working for 5 years, but I have been, obviously, as a career coach. But I found that really intriguing. So I'm sharing this to say we, as applicants, tend to blow up a gap to mean more than it does. And hiring managers, especially, we just talked about it, industry, they care about your experience and technical skills, right? And so we haven't talked about an employment gap being a concern at all. And so also another point too, when job markets are the way they are right now, extremely challenging, or when they were during COVID, there's a lot more leniency and understanding around those age gaps. So, or those employment gaps. So don't blow it out of proportion. You're probably looking at it worse than it actually is. And also, you probably weren't sitting on your laurels. I assume you were doing things like volunteering or maybe getting a certificate in how to use Python or something. Do something if you're unemployed. It could be volunteering, it could be building skill sets, anything you can, even if it's for free, it's going to help you move forward in your career. So, if unemployed, still engage in science.
Thank you so much. We are out of time. Please join me in thanking our speaker, Dr. Cassie Briggs, for this. We really appreciate all of this. I posted in the link there, the link to where Cassie's slides are, and where we'll be and where there's some links, and we'll be adding this recording to that as well when it's ready. Have a wonderful day. Reach out to our speaker, and if there's anything we can do, or if you have suggestions for other webinars, please let us know. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording, and I think we're out of time.